Hi, Michael. Hi, Kim.
Hi, everyone.
How are you?
Kimberly.
Great. Good to be
Good,
with you.
good. Well, welcome and thank you for being here with us at our climate action webinar. We're really happy that you're all here with us. And I'm Beth Novak-Milliken from Spotswood.
And I'm Lindy Novak, Beth's sister.
And we are here because it's the beginning of the new year, and we view this as a great opportunity for us to come together and resolve toward action around climate change and what we can do. You know, for us, this is really deeply meaningful and important because Lindy and I both are second generation stewards of an agriculturally based family business, right? We're growing wine grapes and we're making wine. And so to continue to do so in the best possible way at the highest quality and level, you know, we rely on a relatively stable climate, and we're uniquely here. We uniquely feel the impacts of climate change because there are more extremes, and there's just a lot that's been going on. And so for us, it's something that has become a really important initiative and effort for us. So we're really glad to be here. And Lindy, do you want to just speak a bit to our core purpose?
Sure. So a couple of years ago at a winery retreat down in Sausalito, we were talking as a group and came up with our core purpose, which it's short, grounded in stewardship. We actively affect and inspire meaningful change through nurturing our vineyards, communities, and planet. So we came upon that sort of from the perspective of the Lorax by Dr. Seuss, and adopted the Lorax as kind of our little icon for our efforts. And our vision is to really go beyond just making lovely wines, to be running a business that operates for the general and larger good. And in that realm, to inspire people, including our customers and the vineyards that we work with, and local people in Napa Valley to take heart and join in efforts to try to make things better given all of our climate realities.
Exactly. So what's great is that we got to know Kim Nicholas. I honestly don't remember how I was introduced to her book, Under the Sky We Make. I think I read about it in a review, honestly. Somehow or another, I think it was reviewed. But I read about it and it intrigued me. And so I got it and read it and became really, you know, taken by the message, because I think for all of us, you know, we all wonder, what can we do, right? It's such a big issue. And I think we all wonder, well, what can we do? And I felt like Kim's book really brought it to a place where you could understand what it means as our climate change accelerates, what it means and what it will mean, and yet retaining that sense of what we can do. And so just serendipitously, I had read her book and I was buying copies down at the local bookstore downtown and sharing it with people. And I was in touch with this man named Tony Correa, who's from Sonoma. And I was saying to him, you know, have you heard about this book? And he goes, well, not only have I heard about it, but I'm best friends with Kim's father. She's from Sonoma and I'm best friends with her father. I'm like, can you introduce me? And he's like, sure. So I got Kim's email and I sent out an email to her and copied Tony so that she would know it wasn't just from some odd person here in Napa Valley sending it to her, and just shared with her our interest in the book and how much we enjoyed it and could we work with her. And in the meantime, Michael, who's who's president of the Napa Valley Grape Growers, I mean, you had Kim, I think, already on some webinars with you. So there was all this serendipity, and I think it all came about also because us in the wine business, Kim is a wine lover and was born and raised in Sonoma, and pursued this study of climate change because of her love of wine and her desire to ensure that she never saw the Pinot Noirs and of course now Cabernet Sauvignons. But she loves
You won me over, Beth.
go by the wayside. So anyway, we loved that too, that connection to wine and to agriculture. So and then as we were starting to think about doing this, and we thought about Michael. Michael's been a long time friend. I've known him for a long time. He is a winemaker and chief viticulturalist at Opus One. He's been in this valley for a very long time and has worked with many great properties. And as I mentioned, he's also with the grape growers, and they're doing such an immensely great job driving climate and climate action as a part of their mission, again, built around agriculture. So when we were putting this together, we thought, well, who would be better than Michael? He also is a big fan of Spotswood, which we thank you for and appreciate.
Thank you.
But anyway, we asked Michael, and he readily agreed to join us. So we introduced Michael Silacci, and we introduced Kim Nicholas to you, and we will let Michael, it is yours show to run from here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And Kimberly, it's nice to be on the big screen with you.
Likewise. Thanks.
So I have a question for you, Kimberly. You call yourself a turkey heiress. Now, could you explain your family's legacy in the agricultural industry and how your background influenced your interest to study the impact of modern industrial agriculture on climate?
Yes. So my dad grew up on the property that is just next to Gunlock Bunchu Winery in Sonoma. Many of you probably know that very well, near the Palm Drive there. And I studied some of those vineyards for my PhD. So I have a long history in wine country in Sonoma and Napa. My grandfather bred a new kind of turkey, which is called the Nicholas broad-breasted white turkey. And it is a distinguishing characteristic is that it has clear pin feathers. So previously turkeys had the small black mark on the base of their feathers, and it was unsightly. So Grandpa George did not like paying the chatty women at the poultry factory, I think it was a nickel an hour at the time, to remove them, and bred turkeys on the advice of a professor that he had at UC Davis. So that was his business. My dad was in that business as well. And as I write about in the book, it's kind of inspired me in my work and thinking of the need to have a new relationship with land and with nature and with our food and wine systems, so that we're working with rather than against nature. But I certainly have a deep respect for the land and the place that I grew up, and it's something that I really carry with me.
Thank you. I have a question for Lindy and Beth. What influenced and inspired the Novak family and the whole Spotswood team to embrace a company core purpose to actively affect and inspire change, a big part of which relates to climate?
Well, Beth and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. I think from a family perspective, I would say that we grew up in Southern California with a very adventurous father and an outdoors oriented mother. And so we grew up spending a lot of time outdoors on camping trips, going to the beach, skiing, all kinds of great outdoor activities that just connect you with nature, obviously, and with lovely landscapes and so forth. And so I think that was kind of the beginning of things. And then Beth and I were talking about the fact that when we were, I think in our 20s, we started reading books by John McPhee about David Brower with the Sierra Club. And we read Mark Reisner's Cadillac Desert about water issues in the West. And speaking for myself personally, I had an environmental sensibility and an awareness, and even an awareness of like human population being and even an issue. I'm not quite sure where that came from.
She loved being one of 5 children.
Oh yeah,
That made her very, very happy.
I found it. I was a little embarrassed by it as a teenager. So, and then that carried forward when we moved up here and moved to this lovely property with vineyard attached to the back of an old house, and the pretty mountains on either side of Napa Valley, and so I think that was the beginning. Our mom loved to garden, so
Yes.
there was another outdoor connection that's been passed down, I think, to both of us. And then in terms of the winery, when we started out in the early 80s, the Chapelets were employing Tony Soter, and he was recommended to us as a potential winemaker. And so mom connected with him, and he had he was a very intellectual guy and a philosopher, and had this feeling about organics and organic farming and doing the right thing. So he talked to mom about initiating organic practices on the property. And so then that sort of provided a springboard to
Right, which we started,
further
because
awareness.
we started farming organically in 1985. So we were kind of on the front edge of that. Some others were doing it, but it was really new. And so that was really quite exciting. And then since then we've leapt forward.
And you're also farming biodynamically as well?
We are, yeah. We started that in 2008, and we're certified biodynamic and organic.
Very good. And you have had some pretty amazing winemakers and viticulturists working with you.
Yeah, we have, yeah. And Aaron Weinkauf has been with us since 06 as assistant winemaker and took over as vineyard manager in 08. And he's really been responsible for bringing in the biodynamics. And actually, we now have 11 heritage sheep that are out grazing in a block of our
I
vineyard.
know, I heard they're wandering the vineyard.
Well,
so
they
it's
did. They
very
got out. They
exciting.
got out last
Oh,
night.
they got out.
We had to put them away. It was pretty funny. John, my husband and I did that, but it was quite funny. But anyway, yeah. So we're just doing, I mean, everything that we can.
Perfect. Kimberly, in your book, you outline that we have about 90 months, which when we round up is about 8 years, and 8's a very lucky number in Eastern cultures. So,
Yes.
but we have about 90 months to affect real change, to cut our emissions in half, to understand, to help the planet heal. And can you help us to understand how important it is that we keep warming to no greater than 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, and why this 90-month timeline is so crucial?
Yes. So to sum up from the beginning, it's almost a haiku. What I call climate science 101 is what you need to know about climate change, which is it's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, we can fix it. And what it will take to fix it is that we completely stop adding carbon pollution to the atmosphere. The reason is because carbon pollution lasts essentially forever, hundreds of times longer than human lives. Some of it lasts about 10,000 years in the atmosphere and causes warming that whole time. So when you consider that Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids are about 5,000 years old, plus or minus, the carbon legacy that we're leaving in the atmosphere is one of the most lasting and impactful things that humanity has ever done or will ever do. So we have this very limited window now of very little time left where we can actually manage to limit warming at the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. And the reason that's so important is it's written into the Paris Agreement, which is the international agreement that countries are following or have promised to follow and are not yet following to stop dangerous climate change. 1.5, we now know from the latest science, is really the difference between life and death for many people and places around the world. So the Paris Agreement says we'll limit warming well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursue efforts for 1.5. And that half a degree might not sound like much. You know, you wouldn't dress differently if the weather were a half a degree different or about 1 degree Fahrenheit different. But when you talk about global averages, it's absolutely enormous. You can think about the temperature of the planet like the temperature of the human body. It's a living system, and everything is very finely tuned to temperature. I mean, Beth and Lindy, and you certainly know this working in viticulture. But, you know, if the human body has a fever of 1 degree, that is sick. It's a sign that something is wrong. And that's the state that we're in right now. Our planet is 1 degree warmer because of our burning of fossil fuels. If you have a fever of 2 degrees, you're really sick, and 3 degrees, you're heading to the hospital. So where the planet is heading now is close to 3 degrees Celsius of warming with our current trajectory. And to put that in a viticulture perspective, I was looking at some calculations. So where we're headed with current policies is about the temperature difference in terms of this measure of annual average temperature between Walla Walla, Washington and Napa. So those are obviously very different places. They're growing different varieties. They have a different style of wine, and there's real limitations to what you can do when you are faced with that big of a change. The difference between Napa and Fresno is actually 2.2 degrees. So that's still a very enormous difference. And the difference between Lodi and Fresno is 1.5. So, you know, we know from experience that those places look and feel really different. And the difference might sound small, but it is really big. So our job is basically to leave fossil fuels in the ground to make a fast and fair transition away from carbon-based polluting energy to clean energy, and to reinvent and renew our relationship with nature, including some of the work that Beth and Lindy have been talking about, to work with rather than against nature in agriculture and in how we produce our food and wine, so that we can have a sustainable relationship with the land, basically.
Yeah.
There is an underlying optimism that you have, Kimberly. And can you explain, given what you've just said, how do you remain optimistic, especially about the timeline of 90 months?
I mean, it's a really big challenge. It is, I don't want to undersell that. So, I mean, I'm well aware of how big the challenge is. The very limited carbon budget that we have left to make this actually happen means that countries like the US and industries like the wine industry should be reducing our emissions 10% a year or more. So it's a quick change. I mean, because we've delayed for so long, because we're getting started so late, we've got to make it happen really fast. We know that we have the technology we need. We have on hand about 75% of the technology to replace fossil fuels in the energy system. So we've got to put 50% of the total in place by 2030 or sooner, and we have that much and more that's already ready. So we're not waiting. There's more research that can be done and needs to be done on some of the industries like steel and cement and aviation and so on. But we have what we need to hand to make clean electricity and electrify everything as much as possible to run on it. So it's really a matter of what is humanity, what is possible, what is humanly possible. And that's a moving target. That depends on what we believe and what we do. And I think humanity is capable of rising to this challenge. Will we actually do it? Nobody knows, but it is definitely the most exciting and meaningful, nail-biting, terrifying, exhilarating thing to be part of the growing team that is working as hard as we can to make that happen. And, I think sometimes the role of optimism is a bit misunderstood. People feel like you read a bunch of depressing headlines, you feel like I can't make a difference, or maybe it's too late. And you want to feel hope before you act or get engaged. And I think that's actually backwards. Hope is an outcome of action. And what motivates action is knowing that our actions make a difference. And I can definitely promise you that we are alive at the most important time in human civilization, and what we do does really matter. And we have this incredibly narrow, perilous window of opportunity where we are so consequential to ourselves and to the rest of the planet for the rest of time.
Yeah, I think, sorry to jump in, but I think one of the really meaningful things that you said in your book is that, and if you look at that in a real positive, I mean, that this decade or now it's 8 years. Okay. So we know that, but that it's the most consequential in each of our lives. And I think that's something to really consider. Like if we just dig deep and say, we are going to put everything we have at this, just kind of lean our shoulder in and push against it and really do something for the next 8 years. I mean, starting right now, that's exciting to think that we have that opportunity. And I know for me, I mean, I have a son who's 22 and one who's 20, but regardless, I want to be able to look at everybody in the eye and say, I've done everything I can. I have done and will continue to do. And I think having that, like viewing that as an opportunity, that feels really good. And I really liked that, thinking, gosh, this is really super consequential. It's neat to think that we can.
Beth, given what you just said and speaking of your children, is there any seam between what you do at Spots with the Winery and what you do in your household? Do you have an integration in the way you're reacting to this?
Yeah, we're doing, yeah, I mean, for example, here at the winery, I mean, we have Xeriscape landscaping, we have all solar, we've upgraded our our equipment. So anytime we replace something, or right now we're putting in a new HVA system here at our office, we're working toward LEED certification, we're putting in much more efficient. Everything that we do is about higher efficiency. At our home, same thing. I mean, we have installed, luckily John took control of that and he's really interested in it, but we're all solar. We produce more than what we need. I do have an electric car. I'm trying to encourage John to go in that direction. The car that he wants isn't yet made electric, but that will happen. We drive very little. We don't fly that much. I mean, really, I haven't flown. I can't even it's been quite some time. I was flying more before for business, and that will change. So we're making a lot of changes in our own lives. We're all xeriscape landscaping as well, so low water use. So we're really living it both at home and at Spotswood. And I think that consistency is important, and it feels good.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that when you built your house, I think your first landscape was xeriscape, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time.
I love succulents, and I always have, and we live in a place where those grow well. So they don't require a lot of water, and they look really good.
So Kimberly, the average person, if they're interested in reducing their carbon emissions, what kind of changes should they make in their lives? What's the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, so this was the question we asked in a 2017 research study, and we find that there are 3 high impact climate actions that cut our personal emissions fast. And that is to first, to go flight, car, and meat free is the highest impact version of those actions. And if we break it down a little more carefully, then if you fly, cutting your flying is by far the most impactful thing you can do for the climate from a personal perspective. Second would be driving, and third would be reducing meat. So I think sometimes people are really surprised by how dominated by transport high carbon footprints are. So basically, if you have a carbon footprint that is below the average for your country, then it's not a high impact action to focus on your own emissions reductions. You can work on 4 other levels that I can mention briefly, which are system levels. If you have a high footprint compared to the average, which tends to be correlated with income, and the limit is actually $38,000 a year or more, puts you in the top 10% globally, and $109,000 a year or more puts you in the top 1% globally. So those are the groups that do need to look in the mirror, as I've done as well, and look at our own lifestyle and consumption, and cut back on overconsumption. So again, flying first, then driving, reducing those as much as possible, and looking at your food consumption as well. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Kim, that I was interested in, because I reread your book a second time, as I said, and really enjoyed it. But I'm just interested if you could talk a little bit about whether making those changes personally has felt like a huge sacrifice, or whether that's been offset by kind of the meaning quotient and the, doing something for the greater good. Because I don't know that a lot of people feel like, oh gosh, I really want to take that trip to Hawaii, and it's hard to say no to that.
Yeah, totally. So I am a former frequent flyer. In 2010, I took 15 round trip flights. If you have been on a plane, the last 2 years are obviously exceptional circumstances, but in the average year, if you've been on a plane, more than half of Americans in the average year actually don't fly. And globally, most people have never been on a plane. So I was in this group that's 1% of the global population that causes half of the climate pollution from flying, which is really substantial, like bigger than many countries. So not proud of that, but I just didn't think about it that much. I wasn't thinking about it. And it took inspiration from a friend. It was kind of 2 things. One was a cognitive dissonance of being at a climate conference where I had flown, and a good friend and colleague of mine, Charlie, had taken the train about equal distances. We lived away. And I just had this feeling sitting in this conference, listening to these PowerPoints, this was 10 years ago now, 2012. Already, of course, we knew how serious the impacts were. We were seeing impacts already. They were projected to get much worse. We need to make major changes. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to reduce overconsumption. And yet I felt like I was at a conference of doctors, and we're talking about, how can we get our patients to quit smoking? This is so bad for them. And we're all puffing on cigarettes. So it just really blew my mind. Charlie and I went for a drink after the conference. I'm sorry to say it wasn't wine. I believe it was beer in Vienna. But, over a beer or 2, we had this conversation, and I knew that he had stopped flying within Europe. So that I realized that was actually something I could do. I think I hadn't imagined, I took this job, my family is still in Sonoma, and some of my best friends in California. I couldn't imagine how to get between Sweden and California without flying, although it is possible, and I'm working on it. But I wasn't ready to go there yet. I wasn't ready to give up the idea of that flight. And then I just couldn't face reducing anything. But I realized from Charlie, okay, this is doable. He's still a productive researcher. He's still traveling. He's still having adventures. Traveling is not synonymous with flying, and it doesn't need to be. And there are ways of traveling low carbon that are really fun and adventurous. So just for an example, when my husband and I got married, we flew from Sweden to Canada, where his family is from, and had a wedding with our immediate family. And then we took a train trip across North America, and we had, I think it was 14 small gatherings that were hosted by friends and in parks, and people would get together, and we'd have like a lovely evening with 6 or a dozen people and get to have real conversations, late into the night. And that was so much nicer than having a destination wedding where 200 people came to one place. Everybody would have had to fly. We would have had 5 minutes with each of them. So traveling by train really has made my life richer in many ways. And similarly, I mean, I had 2 cars in California. Here I'm car free. That's of course much easier in a place that has the public infrastructure and transport that Sweden does. But I really appreciate and enjoy it. And I think it's opened a lot of doors for me, and cutting out meat from my diet also was something that was a long journey, but now is something I really enjoy. But I'm not giving up wine. Actually, I don't have to, because it's pretty low carbon. I mean, you can take I see in the chat, maybe we'll get to this, but talking about specific actions for wine consumers, it is important to look at bottling, for example, and that's a large part of wine's carbon footprint.
Yeah.
But if you cut one flight, that's the equivalent of so many bottles of wine. I mean, you could have, I think I calculated, I'm just trying to look for it here, it's like hundreds and hundreds of bottles of fine wine that you could enjoy for the same carbon footprint of skipping that. So I'm sure Spotswood would approve of that calculation.
Opus One would as well.
Kimberly, could you explain the difference between regeneration and exploitation mindsets, and why this shift is important in reducing climate pollution?
Sure. So this I see as basically the root cause of our climate problem and other problems as well, is that we at the moment have too much of a mindset that I call the exploitation mindset. And that is based on 2 erroneous assumptions. One, that some people are superior to other people. So it's not acknowledging the equal worth of every human. And 2, that people in general are superior to or dominating nature. Mm-hmm. And I think these 2 ideas are at the root of many of our current problems. So what I'm advocating for as a set of guiding principles in Under the Sky We Make, I call the regeneration mindset. And by regeneration, I mean moving towards a higher and better purpose, and reinventing and improving and renewing, and kind of harnessing the renewal power of nature. So the regeneration mindset is based on 3 principles. One is to respect and protect and care for people and nature together, to put the health and well-being of people and nature at the heart of everything we do, and as the ultimate goal that we're working towards. 2 is to get to the root cause of problems, rather than looking at the symptoms or trying to clean up a mess after the fact. An ounce of prevention is really worth a pound of cure. So trying to get to the beginning of the chain, and where there's harm being done, to stop it as completely as possible. And 3 is to increase resilience, and that is our connection and ability to deal with and even thrive through change. And that's both at a personal level, cultivating healthy behaviors and relationships so that we can help each other through tough times, because there will be tough times. It's at a community level, and it's also in terms of the natural world, that we're keeping nature intact and letting nature do what it does best when it is healthy and intact. And that's how it can, best support us with the gifts of clean air and water and food and all the things that we need. And also how it can deal with the stresses from the changes that we've caused, and begin to recover from those.
One thing that I liked was your analogy in your book of the bathtub sort of overfilling, right? If you just keep you could describe better than me, but my memory is, you have the tap on at full, and if you just keep the tap on at full, the bathtub's going to overflow, which is sort of like our CO2. Whereas if you back off of that tap and give the drain a chance to, if you have the water on
Catch up a little.
more than the drain can let go, you're going to overflow your bathtub, and that's where we are. And so if we can back that off and put less water in that tub and allow nature, put less CO2 in the air, same thing, and allow Mother Nature to take care of it, Mother Nature would help us if we would only let her, but we've always just viewed it as, we're here to extract and to take, and, extraction can be timber, it can be fuel, it can be water. I mean, water here in the Western United States and in California is very significant. But if you think about all that extraction that we sort of feel like it's our right to take it, and yet we're not looking at the more global, what does it mean for everything, for the health of our, for example, here, our Napa River, or the wildlife that lives there, and that sort of thing. So I just think that I love your bathtub analogy, because it sort of brings it down to, well, down to earth sounds stupid because that's what we're talking about, but
Down in the bathroom.
it brings it down to a level that we all know what a bathtub looks like. So yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I just thought that was, I really liked that, the simplicity of that sort of image.
No, I think you did a great job. And exactly, I mean, the carbon pollution that's coming out of the tap right now is greater than the drain that the natural sinks on the land and the oceans can absorb. So that's why we have this rising level of CO2. And I saw a question in the chat about the pandemic effects. And some people may have seen the headlines about, CO2 levels are still going up even though emissions are down. And this bathtub analogy explains why that's the case, because basically what's happened in the pandemic is the tap has been slightly closed, but there's still a whole lot of water, in this case carbon, flowing out, much more than the drain can remove. So the level is, the rate of increase of the level slowed a little bit, but still, more coming in than being taken out. That's why it's still going up. And that's why in the case of carbon and for fossil fuels, we have to completely turn off the tap and leave them in the ground.
And then Kim, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm jumping in, but you said that we already had the sort of the technology to move away from fossil fuels to give us the energy that we need. What are those? Just if you could just outline what those are.
Yeah, well, I can point to, I mean, it's basically renewables are a key part of it, wind and solar. There's different mixes that are most appropriate for different places. There are a few different analyses you can look at. One is called the Solutions Project, which is out of Stanford. And that's a plan for 100% renewable energy for all 50 states and a bunch of countries now. So I think that was the first one. There have been a few others since. So there's, but they all agree basically that it's possible, and they might have different ideas of, what percent should be wind versus solar or hydro or so on. But, the technology is there and the feasibility has been mapped out, and, what we need and what we're waiting for is to get this group, like the people on this call, activated and energized and, following the lead of others and joining in to be pushing for this change, adopting it themselves and making it happen.
And then I just have one more question, then Michael, I'll let you back in. Do you think nuclear plays a role?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it does. The consensus seems to be to keep existing nuclear power plants operating is the most climate friendly option. Nuclear is a zero carbon source of energy. Even the biggest nuclear advocates don't see a big role for nuclear expanding very much in the coming decades. Nuclear is big and expensive. It tends to run into regulatory and citizen, people often don't like having nuclear plants in their backyards. So there've been a lot of, it's basically too slow. Given that we need to be reducing emissions around 10% per year starting now, we've got to put into place the tech that we have. And I mean, one of the best ways to do that is to reduce overconsumption, because if we can reduce the need for energy, we can meet our energy needs more quickly with that transition. I mean, what's happening right now is that renewables are accelerating. There are more renewables being built, but they're largely being built on top of fossil fuels. So that means, back to the bathtub, the tap isn't getting closed, it's staying at the same rate. And then you have more energy that is not adding carbon to the atmosphere. And what we actually have to do is completely replace fossil energy with clean energy.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Now, Lindy, you and your family have been very thoughtful in business, and you've recently been certified as a B Corp. Could you talk to us a little bit about your approach there? And
Sure.
And maybe
So
we-
that was
we-
a B Corp is, I guess the simplest way to explain it is that it's a sort of a categorization of a business as one that is in existence for doing good. And that means in terms of the community and the environment and employees on many levels. And I think it was, I don't know if it was a trajectory off of 1% for the planet or exactly where B Corp came into your consciousness, because it really was Beth who kind of spearheaded our efforts to fill out a very long series of questions and to obtain our B Corp certification. But it's a pretty big deal, and I think to be able to gain B Corp certification with your first effort to be able to get a score that brings you into that realm, and then to continue, part of the objective is to continue to increase your score, not just to increase the score, but to actually be affecting continually meaningful changes to make sure that you're always trying to make things better. Right. So we're thinking about everything from how much attention we give to all of our staff on our website, even to things like maybe reducing our glass footprint at some point, making our bottle size a little bit smaller because glass had gotten larger and larger bottle size in Napa, sort of as a, I don't know, sort of conveying a mark of quality, and it's understandable, but all of those things I think need to be factored into this general picture. So the B Corp feels really good to be part of that network.
And kind of one of my, I think one of my inspirations are, I read Yvon Chouinard is just one of my heroes. The founder of Patagonia. I just view everything that he does. He just has he's just right in the right place on everything. So I think I've read, Let My People Go Surfing probably 10 or 12 years ago. It's a really good book. And then I get their catalogs, and they don't actually send out so many catalogs anymore, actually. So that's okay, because the print had gotten so small, and I'm at a point where I can't read the print that was that small. But anyway, so I get there online. But they're always talking about what they're doing, and I think I just kept seeing B Corp, and I'm like, I wonder if we could do that. And so we started answering the questions. It's a lot of questions, and you get partial points. You might get 0.25 points for this or 0.3. So you're trying to reach this number, but it's aspirational, and it's a really great thing to do. And we got in first with a score of 80, which is the minimum score that you can get. But we got that first round, which is really rare. And you do this every 3 years. So we'll go back for recertification in 2023. And we think we will get anywhere between 105 and 115 points. Yeah. And so, your goal is to keep doing better, but it is about caring for your community, caring for your employees, caring for your natural environment, caring for your customers, so you're really looking at things. It's capitalism with a conscience, basically, right? This is our family business. This is what we do. We need to be profitable to do what we do. So this is very serious for us. And yet we feel like all of these things that we can do are going to help us be the true multi-generational family business that we want to be, because we do want to pass this on to the next generation. And to do so, we need to try to pass on a stable enough climate that the next generations can make really good wine here. Yeah.
And I understand, I know for a fact that Spotswood was one of 2 wineries that achieved Napa Green Vineyard status certification.
I think Opus might have been the other. Is that correct?
Coincidence.
Yes.
It's great.
Go Opus, go Spotswood. I love the new Napa Green Vineyard because it's actually a rigorous program, and it also speaks to social accountability. It speaks to what you can or cannot use in your vineyard. It talks about no deforestation, which is really important, keeping our forests intact, even while we need to manage our forests to make them healthier and more fire resilient. but there's so many aspects to it, and Anna Britton, who's running that, is really passionate. So that is a great thing. And Michael, I'm so glad that you have, you jumped on this and that you're so passionate too, because Opus has such a broad reach, and you can do so much, and you have a real global reach. So I just look at you and say, I really admire what you're doing at Opus One, and I'm glad we are on the same team.
Yeah, the admiration is mutual. When they asked for a quote, I actually mentioned, I said Spotswood was the other. When they asked a quote about Opus, I said, well, Spotswood was the other one that was certified.
Well, thank you.
So
very nice of you.
I just want to jump in for 1 second. I don't know, Michael, if you've also been involved with the International Wineries for Climate Action. I know, Beth and Linda, you have, and I think they're doing a really great job because they are pursuing what's called Science-Based Targets Initiative. And I thought that might be of interest for others on the call who are outside the Napa Valley, because you mentioned a lot of great local initiatives that are doing really important work. But, for folks in other industries, the science-based targets are across industries. I'm working with a grocery chain in Sweden here who's certified with them. And as the name would suggest, they are a really rigorous standard that has ways for people, businesses and industries to demonstrate that they're doing their fair share to meet the Paris Agreement targets to reduce emissions fast enough to actually limit warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees. So I really appreciate the work that they're doing. And that might be, for folks who are interested in not just your personal footprints, but also your effect through business, which can, of course, be very powerful. I recommend Science-Based Targets and something called Climate Solutions at Work from Project Drawdown.
Yeah, International Wineries for Climate Action. Actually, it was Martin Reyes who went to the Porto Protocol on our behalf and came back really enthusiastic about this group. And it's a group that was founded by the Torres family in Spain and the Jackson family here in the US. And Martin sort of sparked an interest in it. So I started finding out a bit about it. And now we're not only members, but I'm on the board. I love to add things to my plate. But it's just a great organization, because what it makes you do is that you measure your GHG emissions. I mean, this is really, really important. So, because you can only manage what you measure. Yeah. And so we've now measured our GHGs in 18 and in 19 and in 20. We will have 2021 completed, because we have a calculator now that we have, and we can get this done by about the end of the first quarter of this year. And so then we'll have 5 years, and you start seeing, okay, and then we're making a 10-year plan out through 2030. I'm sorry. So, I guess it's really an 8-year plan, because we know we need to decrease our emissions by 10% a year. And we're looking at how we're going to do that. And it's really, really interesting. A small winery like us, we're already a relatively small producer of carbon emissions. Having said that, we can make change. Lindy brought up, down weighting our glass as an example. Right. But it's really exciting because you can measure it, and then you can make change and make business decisions based upon decreasing GHG emissions. And who would have thought about that? We wouldn't have thought about that, but you can do it, and it's good for your business, and it's good for the climate. And then part of that, and you probably know a lot more about this than I do, Kim, but it's the race to zero, the United Nations race to zero. We're automatically a part of that. And I think that's really exciting too, because it is international, and that's the point.
We had a question that came in before the Q&A session. I'd like to ask you. The question is this: while I understand the popular impacts from global warming, sea level rise, warming temperatures, etc., it's the unknown impacts that really worry me. Potential sea current changes with warming, loss of biodiversity, loss of nutrients fueling life as we know it, etc. Can you talk about other unexpected issues that bother you most?
Oh boy, it's already 2 a.m. here, and you really want to keep me up at night. Yes, those things bother me as well, and you're right to be worried about them. They are all connected in many ways. I think the thing that freaks me out the most is sea level rise, to be honest. I think because some of it is irreversible, and because we're close to dangerous tipping points where, when people talk about the climate crisis or the climate emergency, these tipping points are a big part of the reason why, that there are you know, it's not always the case that you just emit a little more pollution, a little more pollution, a little more, and you see a small change. There can be a step change, a big change, something like major ice sheet disintegration, that would really reshape our world in very bad ways, especially for those of us who live or love coastal places. So that there's a big worry for you, and a big reason to, you know, stick with and fight for limiting warming as much as possible, reducing emissions as fast as possible, because the margins are really tight.
And Michael, will
Yeah.
you ask the second question that came after that? Because I think that's an important one too, or would you like me to ask it?
Oh, please go ahead.
So, no, I just thought this was, you know, given sort of the state of our politics and the difficulty of getting things agreed upon and done. This question came in, given our inability to agree on anything on a national scale, let alone on a global scale, if humans don't move forward with recommendations to lower carbon emissions, what is plan B?
Oh,
Well, our options are prevent, prepare, or suffer. And so far we are failing at preventing. We're failing at preventing and preparing, and we're doing a lot of suffering. And I mean, that is true even for a wealthy and well-prepared place like the Napa Valley, as you know all too well, with the catastrophic wildfires that have affected my family, who were evacuated. Thankfully, we're safe, but you know, you have friends and neighbors who have lost so much, and those fires have been made twice as likely, and in the West, twice as large, by human-caused climate change, and have caused a lot of suffering. So the alternative to preventing warming is preparing for it, and we're not doing a good job of that. And it's not possible to completely prepare for the amount of warming that we're headed for right now. So the alternative is suffering, and I don't like that alternative. So I think we should really be doubling down on preventing as much as we can, and preparing for what's left, to basically, you know, manage the changes we can't avoid and avoid the changes that we can't manage.
yeah.
Well, because we've already had to, you know, manage here with shade cloth and. you
Oh,
know,
yeah. I
various-
mean, we've made huge, a lot of investments around climate change, and the fires of 2020 came very, very close
Perilously
to us,
close,
right
right?
behind us.
Yeah.
And it was really scary. So it's all very, you know, and again, and it's also just so that people understand too, Kim, and you alluded to it at the beginning of the conversation, but when you're talking about, you know, 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, it's really hard to put that into context for us, for humans. But when you're looking at the extremes, that's what we're seeing. You know, as an example, we got just a major dump of snow. We got a lot of rain here too, but a lot of snow in the Sierra, which was a gift between sort of right around Christmas and between Christmas and New Year's. Well, nothing has fallen since. It's gotten warm enough that the snow there has iced up. So the conditions in January and January 20th are icy. There is no snow coming at the moment. So the ridge has settled back in here. And so those are the types of things where it's not just, I mean, us in agriculture, we feel it, you know, Michael and us, and we all feel it because we know it's here, and we've invested in shade cloth and things to protect our vines from the heat. We're even considering, interestingly enough, I mean, it would be an experiment, but putting solar panels over parts of our vineyard just to start seeing if you can not only create energy, but also offer your vines some shading. It's happening. There's a lot of things that we're considering. We're also, you know, considering buying land in a cooler region so that we can just hedge our geographic bets. Spotswood, we believe, is, I mean, this is our home. We will be here, and we know that the soils are great, and we take great care of them, and we'll be growing grapes here for a long time. But we're just thinking, well, down the road as it warms, where are we going to be able to sort of grow Cabernet next? And we want to be somewhere cooler. But I think that's the thing, is that we can all say 1.5 degree, you hear all this thing, but we're already experiencing the extremes that come with that, the highs and the high winds, and the fires that we've had have been everybody's read about them. Napa Valley, Sonoma Valley are well-known places, and they're all over the news. And it's an interesting time. And so we need to be paying attention, because we do still have this opportunity. And to have the opportunity is actually a gift, right? Everybody doesn't always have an opportunity to make real change, but we do have an opportunity. And so I hope we'll all take it.
Yeah.
There's a question, Mark has a question. He asks, at Spotswood, are you using regenerative farming practices in your vineyard?
Yeah.
We are, and in fact, and I'm sorry I'm answering that just because
No, please,
I had a
we discussed
meeting
it. I
earlier in the
figured
week.
that question would come in.
But yes, we are going to go, we are organic and biodynamic. And so, but in essence, we are farming regenerative organic, and we are going to go for the certification. It's somewhat redundant to our existing certifications, but we feel like it's very important for us to get that certification. So we'll get that very quickly because we're already farming that way. So the answer is yes.
And Brian has a question. It's seeking a commitment from you. Renewable energy is a key tool in the fight to mitigate climate change. The California Public Utilities Commission is proposing new rules, net metering 3.0, that favor the big utilities and will most certainly reduce incentives for rooftop solar and thereby inhibit its adoption.
Correct.
But that in other forms of solar will certainly be essential to reduce carbon emissions. And the decision has been postponed to sometime in February. And he notes that you are using solar,
Yes.
and he wonders, can he encourage Spotswood and more broadly the Grape Growers Association to add its voice to see if the commission and Governor Newsom won't revise its proposal.
So I've already done so. I've signed many petitions. I've written a letter. And so we're well aware of this, and the notion that our CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, and PG&E that has been responsible for
A number of
a
fires.
lot of many of the fires that have started are actually attempting to step in and de-incentivize solar is absolutely something that I simply cannot fathom. Like, that just takes me down a path that we don't want to go. So I have written various, yes, I am very, very engaged in that. And we all need to write letters. You can get online with the CPUC and you can submit your comments. It's really relatively very easy to do, and it takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And it's important that everybody make their voices heard. I mean, all of our voices count.
Yeah.
And if you will make them heard, we can make progress. I mean, Kim, what's your figure to bring you back in? And we're going to let you go pretty soon because it is well past your bedtime.
Yeah.
But you said it takes a critical mass of what number of people to really start affecting change?
Yeah, so the research shows is that you need 25% of the population to be unified in advocating for change, and that does change people's social norms, so their expectations and behavior, basically. So that I find really encouraging, because it can be hard to imagine mobilizing large majorities, even though actually we're many more than you might think. So the majority of Americans are already concerned or alarmed about climate change. More than 70% are worried about climate change, but we're not matching that concern and that worry with action. So only 2% of charitable giving in the US goes to climate or environmental causes. Most investments are still somehow connected with climate destruction, even if people don't realize, in terms of pension funds and mutual funds and investments in supporting fossils. The politics still is very much tied up with the status quo. And those are problems that do need us to engage, as you mentioned, both in our communities and at higher levels, because that's how those systems start to change. And it doesn't take everyone, but it takes a critical mass. And our job basically, I mean, the next few years is this race between this tipping point of, will we reach this wonderful and desirable social tipping point where we get this kind of political will and collective action and enough people mobilized and engaged and talking about and acting on climate to do the prevention that we need, or will we fail to do that and have these catastrophic ecological and physical tipping points? And obviously what we're pushing for is the former, and that's why we're having these kind of conversations.
Correct. Yeah. All right. Well, have we exhausted all of our, no pun intended for you, Kim, but have we exhausted our topics? I mean, I think I've learned a lot from this too, and I have read the book, and I've appreciated the questions. I'm just, if there's anything that we haven't touched upon, please ask. Or Michael, do you have anything else, or Lindy or Kim? Because I just don't want to hold everybody extra time, but I want to make sure that if anybody has some questions, we get those answered.
Oh gosh, I mean, I see there are 19 questions in the chat, so we definitely will unfortunately not get to all of those now. I apologize. I'm putting in the chat a link to my free newsletter, which is called We Can Fix It. You can find it on the platform Substack and subscribe. It comes out once a month. Or next week, next Thursday will be the next edition.
Really
And
good.
actually, many of the questions in the chat I have answered there. So I'm sorry if I won't get to them all now, but it's about facing climate change with facts, feelings, and action. It draws from the book, but also incorporates a lot of new material and up to date. So I hope we can go from there. I don't know, Michael, if there were any questions in the Q&A that you wanted to pull out, or if we need to wrap up.
No, I think we should probably wrap up in the interest of your health.
Well, we would have loved to have had Kim here, but
Yeah,
it would have been a
Yeah.
long, plane flights are kind of off the table for reasons we've already discussed. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, I'm very happy to do these kind of conversations with others who are on this call. Not at this hour, that is only for Beth and Lindy. We'll have to do something more reasonable in Sweden, but I'm sure we can work it out. And I mean, I think this group of wine lovers and people who care about the special place that the Napa Valley is, and who appreciate enjoying that and sharing that with others. I mean, we have so much to give and to share, and so much power and responsibility that I think we could be using so much more effectively. I pasted in the chat something I wrote for Decanter a few months ago that was about climate action for wine lovers, and that, you know, the climate really needs you as wine lovers. So there's some practical ideas there, but please, thank you for engaging, and please continue to step up, and feel free to get in touch if you want more concrete ideas on what you particularly can do.
Wonderful.
Well, I think one of the nicest things is to be able to partner with people of like mind. Of course, we want to expand the message beyond
Correct.
that, but being able to talk with other people who really care
Care.
and are working to affect change is it's encouraging and it's meaningful. So
Exactly.
thank you.
So thank you, Kim, for being a part of this. You may go to bed now. 2 a.m. The
Thank
2 a.m.
you.
club. And Michael, thank you very much for
Thank you
moderating. We
both.
really appreciate, Lindy and I really appreciate having both of you here. But Michael, thank you for moderating and for all that you are doing. And let's keep it going. This is our opportunity. We are lucky to have these, 90 whatever it is months that we can take action. So let's make it happen. Go team.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Bye-bye. All right.
Sweet
Bye.
dreams.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Michael.